So first, let's talk about game instances. A game instance spawns when the game starts and is deleted when you close the game. It goes between levels. It doesn't get reset when we open new levels. It can be accessed from any blueprint, and it is perfect for storing global data. For example, if you're making a single-player game with multiple levels, you could store, say, the player's health in the game instance, so the value is carried on from one level to another. And that's just a small example. There are many, many things you can do with a game instance. So let's make one at the moment. So let's make a new folder, and we'll call this Game BP for Game Blueprints. And let's go here, Blueprint Class, and we want to open up all classes here and search for Instance. And here it is down here, Game Instance Select. And we can just call this HG for Horror Game, Game Instance. Save. Now we have to add our game instance to our world. We have to let our world know that this is the game instance we want to be using, not the default one. And we do that in our project settings. So if you go up here to settings and click project settings, here we have a long list of settings that we can access. Now if we go down to maps and modes, there is a game instance class right here at the bottom. Click on that and choose our new HG game instance. And close that. Perfect. In the next episode, we will be talking about the game mode. A game mode stores a level's information, like what pawn, controller, game state, and HUD class we're using, and we'll talk about all 4 of those in later episodes. Game modes are spawned when a level is opened and removed when a level is closed, unlike a game instance, which goes across multiple levels. In multiplayer games, the game mode controls how many people log into a level and how they join, as well as stopping players from joining or knowing when players leave. Another important thing to point out is in multiplayer games, only the server has access to the game mode. Since this is a single-player game, that's not necessarily important for our project. So let's make another folder inside our content game blueprint, and we'll just call this level 1 for our level 1 level. And we can open it up. And inside this, let's make a game mode. So let's go to Blueprint Class, and right here we have Game Mode Base. We can click on it, and we can call it L1 for level 1, and Game Mode. So let's assign this game mode to our level. We can do that right here in our World Settings tab. If you don't have it, you can go to Window, World Settings, right here. And we have this thing called Game Mode Override, and it says none for now. We can open this up, and we can see our L1 game mode right there. Let's click it. Now if we expand our selected game mode here, we have a few things, like our default pawn class, our HUD class, our player controller, our game state, our player state, and our spectator class. These things are the kind of information that our game mode holds. Now every single level needs a game mode attached to it. If you notice, we can remove it and it says none. If it says none, it will use the default game mode. To find what the default game mode is, we can go to Settings, Project Settings, and Maps and Modes. And here we have the default game mode, which is just the regular game mode base. If you want, you can make it the L1 game mode, and the none will default to the L1 game mode. I'm still going to use the game mode override for L1 game mode. All these things in the selected game mode are going to be future episodes, and we'll talk about each one. Game states are similar to game modes, but in multiplayer games, both the server and the clients have access to it. If you remember in our last episode, I made sure to point out that the game mode, only the server has access to it. In multiplayer games, game states hold level information such as world time or the current goal of the level. And since we're making a single player game, we'll just keep most of that information in our game mode. So let's make a game state now. So we can right click, right now we're still in our content, game, blueprints, level 1 folder. And we can go to blueprint class and search game state. And we want to choose game state base, not game state. Click that, select. And we'll call this L1 game state. Let's go ahead and add this game state to our game mode. So we open this up. And over here, under classes, we have our game state class right there. We can now select our L1 game state. Perfect. In the next episode, we'll be going over our player state. Player states are like game states, but instead of one per level, there's one per player per level. Once again, since this is a single player game, separating the game mode, game state, and player state doesn't have too much importance. Player state is used to store things like the player name, their high score, numbers of kills / deaths, etc. Let's go ahead and make one. So right click, blueprint class, and we want to search for player state. It's right here under info. Select, and we will call it L1 player state. Once again, to let our level know that this is the player state we want, we have to add it to our L1 game mode. So open it up. Right here it says player state class. Click on it, and we can choose L1 player state. Alright, the HUD class. This video will be very short because the HUD class in Unreal Engine is not really used anymore. I'm only showing it because I occasionally use the HUD class for debugging, but our entire user interface will be powered with UMG, which we'll go over later. So let's just create a HUD class right now. So blueprint class, search HUD. We want to choose this first one right here, and we'll call it L1 HUD. And like always, add it to our game mode. Right here, HUD class, L1 HUD. And that'll be it. Alright, player controllers. You can think of the player controller as the brain that drives the player character. A controller can possess or unpossess different characters or pawns, and that becomes the new body to our brain. Another way to think of it is the player controller you can imagine as you, the player, and the character as the actual character in the game. The player controller will handle anything that would be the same no matter what character you're possessing. For example, if every character you possess uses WASD to add movement input, you could keep that in the player controller. So let's create one now. We want to go out of our level 1 folder and just into our game blueprint, because we'll be using the same player controller for every level. So let's go to blueprint class, and player controllers right here under common classes. Select it, and we can call it HG for horror game, and make that capitalized. Player controller, and hit save. We want to add this to our game mode, so open up L1 game mode, and right here under player controller class, we can change it to HG player controller. Once we create our player character, we'll come back to the player controller and we'll add some control functions. So player characters are what we mentioned earlier in the last episode. The player character is the body that the player controller controls. We keep our camera and our mesh in the player character. We could also have created a pawn, which are similar to characters, but the character is a type of pawn that has the ability to walk around built in. And we want to include the ability to walk around. So let's create a character. So back in our level 1 folder, let's right click, create a blueprint class, and right here under common classes we have character. We also have pawn, which I just mentioned, and if you read here, it's an actor that can be possessed by our controller and receive input from a controller. And our character is a type of pawn that includes the ability to walk around. So let's click character, and we'll call L1 character. Let's go ahead and open him up. And the first thing we want to do is add a camera for our view, since we are making this first person. So let's add a component and search for camera. We want to choose the regular camera right here. And we want to put this kind of at the top, about where our character's eyes would be. So you can just drag it up, and I will keep it at a value of Z60. So let's compile and save, and let's add our character to our game mode. I already have it open, but it's right here in our Game Blueprints Level 1 folder, and open L1 game mode. And right here, under default pawn class, we can choose L1 character. And we can compile and save. Great, we filled up everything we need right now in the game mode. So if you remember correctly, our game mode is set to this level that we're in, level 1, because we put it in our game mode override in the world settings. It's also our default game mode, so if this were to be none, it would still be our L1 game mode. Let's just go ahead and select that again. Our L1 game mode lets the level know that our character is our L1 character, our HUD is our L1 HUD, our player controller is our player controller, and so on and so forth. So now, when we hit play, we are now playing as our L1 character that we just created. Notice that I cannot walk around and I cannot look around because we have not implemented any code that tells our character to walk around when we hit the WASD keys or look around when we move the mouse. Now to prove that this was our character, we can go into our L1 character, event graph, and here on the begin play, we can print a string, and we can say, this is our L1 character. Print strings are a great way to debug. So if we hit play again, in the upper left, we can now see this text is kind of covered up by our click for mouse control. But it says this is our L1 character in blue. It would not say that if we were playing as a different character in our game. Now you have a good understanding on setting up for a game and a bit on what classes do what. Next up, let's actually give us the ability to look and walk around.